The last thing Nicholas Rain expected as he sat alone in his hotel lobby was to be approached by three identical little girls, blonde, wide-eyed, and holding a silver heart necklace he hadn't seen in 6 years. One look at it, and everything he'd buried came rushing back. He'd given that necklace to the only woman he ever loved. The one who disappeared without a trace. And now, standing before him, were three impossible reminders that she may not have left alone.
Before we get started, if you are just joining us for the first time, welcome to Lamp Stories. We are so excited to have you here with us. Please do well to like, subscribe and drop a comment with where you are watching from.
Nicholas Rain didn't believe in fate. His life had been built on structure, precision, and strategy. He planned everything, from his meals to his mergers, weeks in advance. So when his schedule unexpectedly shifted that morning, when his flight to New York was delayed and he was rebooked into a suite at his own hotel in downtown Seattle, he took it as nothing more than a logistical inconvenience. He didn't know yet that this minor disruption would be the beginning of everything he thought he had lost finding its way back to him. The lobby was quiet for a weekday morning, filled mostly with a few early check-ins and hotel staff preparing for a corporate event. Nicholas sat alone in one of the private lounge areas, coffee in hand, phone on the table, but untouched. He stared out the window, thinking about nothing in particular, which for him was rare. Something in the silence settled around him differently today, not heavy, not light, just unfamiliar. He didn't see them approach until they were standing right in front of him. Three little girls, blonde, around 6 years old, standing side by side like a small army with clasped hands and matching expressions of both nervousness and curiosity. Their hair was tied in identical braids, and their eyes, soft brown, wide, and deeply familiar, fixed on him with a quiet kind of intensity. "Excuse me," the one in the center said, her voice careful but confident, "have you seen a necklace like this?" She held up a small silver heart hanging from a delicate chain, the kind of item any child might have, but this one stopped Nicholas cold. He knew it. Knew it better than anything he owned. It was the necklace he had given to Olivia Hart on her birthday, 6.5 years ago. He had spent weeks choosing it, engraving it with a single letter, O, on the back. It had been simple, understated, and full of meaning. She had worn it every day until the day she vanished. He stared at the necklace, then at the little girl holding it, and felt a strange, slow unraveling begin in his chest. "Where did you get that?" he asked, his voice lower than he intended. "It's our mom's," the second girl replied quickly. "She says it was from someone special, but we never met him." Nicholas's pulse started to race, but he kept his expression steady. "What's your mom's name?" All three girls looked at one another before answering. The third one, who hadn't spoken yet, said the name so softly it almost disappeared in the air between them. Olivia. And that was when everything around him fell away. The background noise, the quiet hum of hotel music, the barista calling out orders, all of it dissolved under the weight of that one name. His chest tightened. Olivia Hart. The woman who had once been his everything. The woman who vanished from his life 6 years ago with no explanation, no warning, no goodbye. He had searched. Called. Sent people. Investigated. She had disappeared completely. Now, here were three little girls, each a mirror of each other, and, more disturbingly, a mirror of him. Blonde hair that must have come from her, but there was something in the shape of their mouths, their brows, the curve of their cheekbones that he couldn't ignore. And those eyes, those wide, searching eyes, were hers in color, but something in the gaze was his. He tried to breathe evenly. "Is your mom here now?" "She's checking in," the first girl said. "We came to sit while she talks to the lady at the desk." He stood slowly, his heart thudding loud in his chest. He didn't know what he was about to face. He didn't know if he was ready. But he knew one thing, he had to see her. Because if this was real, if these girls were who he already feared they were, then everything he thought was behind him had just walked back into his life. Nicholas didn't move right away. His legs were tense, his hands curled slightly at his sides, as if his entire body was trying to hold still while his heart bolted ahead of him. The girls had returned to their seats now, giggling quietly and looking at the necklace like it held a secret they didn't fully understand. He watched them with a strange mix of wonder and dread, unsure which emotion would win out. He felt like he was standing on a cliff edge with no idea how far the fall would be, or what was waiting at the bottom. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw her. Olivia. She appeared near the front desk with a suitcase behind her and a worn messenger bag slung over her shoulder. Her hair was longer now, tied in a loose braid, darker than he remembered, but still unmistakably hers. Her posture was cautious but calm. She leaned forward slightly as she spoke to the receptionist, her expression warm and tired all at once. When she turned around and caught sight of the girls across the lobby, she smiled. And then she saw him. For a second, her entire body froze. The color drained from her face, and her hand instinctively clutched the strap of her bag tighter. Her eyes met his, wide and full of something between shock and guilt. She didn't move toward him. She didn't look away either. It was as if time had locked them both in place. Nicholas took a slow breath and crossed the lobby toward her. Every step felt heavier than the last, as if the air had thickened around him. He didn't know what he was going to say. He just knew he had to say something. Anything. Olivia, he said, and even hearing himself speak her name again felt unreal. You're here. Her voice was almost a whisper. Nick. I thought you were. He stopped himself. The truth was, he didn't know what he thought. Lost? Gone forever? He had mourned her like someone who had died. But now she was standing in front of him, alive, real, unchanged in ways that mattered and completely different in ways that hurt. She looked at the girls briefly, then back at him. Her throat moved as she swallowed hard. This isn't how I wanted you to find out. His eyes flicked toward the children and back to her. They're mine, aren't they? There was no use pretending. She didn't try to lie. She didn't cry. She just nodded slowly. Yes. That one word hit him like a blow to the chest. The world didn't spin or collapse, but something inside him cracked open. It wasn't rage he felt. It wasn't even betrayal. It was grief, for the time he had missed, for the moments he'd never get back, for the birthdays, the first steps, the questions he hadn't been there to answer. Why? He asked, quieter now. Why didn't you tell me? She looked down at the floor before meeting his eyes again. Because I was scared. Because I thought I was doing the right thing. Because back then, I didn't think you would choose us over your career, and I couldn't stand the idea of being someone's complication. You weren't a complication, he said sharply, the words rushing out of him. You were everything. I would've, God, Olivia, I would've done anything if I had known. She closed her eyes briefly, as if the weight of that truth was too much to hold. I know that now. But at the time, I convinced myself otherwise. And once they were born, once I built something stable, I didn't know how to go back. He took a step closer, not threatening, just broken. You don't just disappear and take my children with you. You don't get to make that choice alone. I know, she said again, softer this time. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. There was silence between them then, not because there was nothing to say, but because too much had already been said in just a few words. One of the girls called out, Mom. Who is that? Olivia turned and forced a smile. Just a friend, sweetheart. Nicholas didn't correct her. Not yet. His voice was too raw. His heart was still trying to catch up. But as he looked at those three little girls, three versions of himself in miniature, he knew one thing for certain. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. Later that evening, Nicholas sat alone in his hotel suite, the city glowing beyond the glass behind him, but he didn't see any of it. The room was silent except for the faint hum of distant traffic, yet his mind was anything but quiet. The conversation with Olivia played on a loop, each word echoing louder than the last. Her voice, calm but hesitant, repeated in his head, every pause pregnant with years of absence and every glance filled with the weight of what she hadn't told him. 3 daughters. 3 little lives he hadn't known existed. How could he have missed so much? He'd spent those years building hotels across countries, speaking on global stages, dining with heads of industries, yet he hadn't known that 3 versions of himself were learning to walk, learning to speak, growing up without him. It made everything he'd achieved feel hollow. Beautiful, polished, but empty. He thought of the way one of the girls had tucked her hair behind her ear in a gesture he knew he did himself. How another had squinted when she focused on something, the same way he always had when reading fine print. These weren't coincidences. They were blood. They were his. He barely slept that night. When the sun finally rose and filtered through the tall windows, Nicholas was still seated in the same chair, still trying to comprehend the fact that his life had just split into 2, the one he'd known until yesterday and the one he was just beginning to understand. He didn't have a plan. He didn't even have the language yet for the emotion that sat so heavy in his chest. But he knew what he needed to do. By midday, he walked down to the front desk and asked for Olivia's room number. The clerk hesitated, citing privacy policies, until Nicholas gave his name. The staff knew him, he owned the place. With an apologetic look, the receptionist handed him the room number. He stood outside her door for longer than he meant to. He thought about knocking. About what he would say if she opened the door and looked at him the same way she had in the lobby, like he was a ghost. But before he could move, the door cracked open. Olivia stood there, one hand on the doorframe, the other brushing a piece of hair behind her ear. She looked exhausted. Her eyes were tired, but not surprised. She had known he would come. "I thought you might," she said quietly, stepping aside to let him in. The suite was modest, clean, filled with evidence of children. There were coloring books on the table, tiny shoes near the couch, and a stuffed bunny on the bed. It smelled like fruit snacks and vanilla lotion. He turned slowly, trying to absorb it all. Olivia motioned for him to sit. He didn't. "I need to know them," he said. "I know," she replied. "I want that too. I just don't know how we do this, Nick. I've raised them alone. I made the choice for both of us, wrongfully, and I don't know how to bring you into their lives without shaking everything we've built. I don't want to take anything from you," he said. "I don't want to confuse them or disrupt their world. But they're mine. I deserve to know them. And they deserve to know me. We can't pretend this didn't happen." Olivia nodded, biting her bottom lip like she always used to when she was overwhelmed. "They're smart. And intuitive. They'll ask questions. Then we answer them. Together." She looked at him for a long time. She had imagined this moment so many times, reunions filled with blame, rage, maybe even rejection. She never imagined calm. She never imagined him standing there like a man ready to learn rather than a man demanding what was his. "They're in the other room," she said. "You can say hello. But, keep it simple. Let them come to you." He nodded, and she walked to the adjoining room and pushed the door open. Girls' laughter spilled out. And Nicholas Rain, man of numbers, power, and control, walked toward the sound of 3 little voices that had already changed everything. The moment Nicholas stepped into the adjoining room, the noise settled for just a second, as if the air itself paused to acknowledge the change. The room was colorful and slightly chaotic, with toys, scattered crayons, and half-zipped backpacks lining the floor. 3 little girls sat cross-legged on the carpet, each of them looking up at him with open curiosity, the kind that only children possess, unfiltered, sharp, and unafraid. They didn't know who he was, not exactly. But they sensed something. Maybe it was the way Olivia stood silently behind him, watching, unsure whether to intervene or simply observe. Or maybe it was in the way Nicholas looked at them, carefully, reverently, as though this was the most important boardroom he'd ever walked into. He crouched down slowly, trying not to loom. "Hi," he said, his voice softer than usual. "I'm Nicholas. I think I might be someone you'll be seeing a lot more of." One of the girls tilted her head. "Are you Mommy's friend?" "I used to be," he said with a small smile. "I'd like to be again." Another girl, more curious than cautious, pointed at him. "You look like me." Nicholas let out a quiet laugh, one that caught him off guard. "I think that's because we're family." All three stared at him, processing that. No fear. No rejection. Just interest. The third girl, the one who had shown him the necklace the day before, crawled a little closer. "You talk like the man on Mommy's computer." That made Olivia smile from where she stood. "That's because he is." Nicholas sat fully on the floor now, legs crossed, jacket wrinkling against the carpet, but he didn't care. He asked their names again, Ava, June, and Lily, and this time remembered who was who. They began showing him drawings, arguing over which picture was better, asking if he knew how to draw horses, if he liked macaroni and cheese, if he had a favorite princess movie. He didn't know how to keep up, but he tried, and every time he stumbled, they giggled and leaned in closer, as if forgiving him made the whole thing more fun. They didn't ask if he was their dad. Not yet. Maybe they didn't understand the concept fully, or maybe they were waiting to see what it would mean if they asked. Nicholas didn't push. He didn't need to name it. He just needed to be present. At one point, Lily pulled a photo album from the shelf and plopped it onto his lap. It was heavy and full of snapshots, birthdays, first steps, beach days, art projects, spilled cereal, scraped knees. He flipped through each page like it was sacred, silently mourning everything he hadn't been there for. But he didn't let grief win. Instead, he looked at each photo with awe. He studied their baby faces, their silly expressions, the way Olivia had captured it all with care and love. And he realized she hadn't just protected them. She had poured everything into giving them a joyful life. Eventually, the girls got restless and returned to their toys, dragging him into a game that made no sense but required him to wear a tiara. Olivia watched from the doorway with arms folded, a quiet storm of emotions behind her eyes. Nicholas looked up at her, still wearing the plastic crown, and smiled. "You did an incredible job," he said. "They're amazing." She didn't smile, but her eyes softened. "They are. And I don't want to take any of it from you." "I know," she said. "But I don't know what comes next." Nicholas nodded. Neither did he. But he knew what came now. He stood, walked over to her, and spoke quietly so the girls couldn't hear. "Let me be part of it. Not because I'm owed anything, but because I want to earn it. For them. For you. However long it takes." For the first time since he'd found her again, Olivia didn't look away. She nodded. And that was the beginning of everything new. In the days that followed, Nicholas made no grand promises, offered no ultimatums, and didn't try to insert himself where he wasn't welcome. Instead, he showed up. Quietly. Every morning, he brought coffee for Olivia and a small treat for the girls, nothing extravagant, just something thoughtful. Sometimes it was a new set of colored pencils, sometimes stickers, once a book about dinosaurs that Lily had mentioned in passing. He didn't stay long at first. He knew Olivia needed time to adjust, to understand that this version of him wasn't here to reclaim the past or disrupt what she had built. He was simply trying to belong in the present. The girls welcomed him without hesitation. Within a week, they began waiting for him by the window. When they saw him approaching, they'd race to the door, their voices echoing through the hallway. "Nicholas is here." Ava would call out, while June demanded he sit beside her for breakfast, and Lily insisted he learn the latest dance she had made up in the living room. He found himself folding laundry with Olivia while the girls played. He took them to the park, holding all three of their tiny hands in his much larger ones as they crossed the street. He read to them, learned their bedtime routines, helped clean up toys, and asked questions about things he didn't understand, things Olivia had once had to handle entirely on her own. At first, Olivia watched everything from a distance. She was polite, even warm, but hesitant. She still hadn't forgotten the night she found out she was pregnant or the fear that followed. She hadn't forgotten what it felt like to imagine telling him and seeing her entire future vanish in his expression. But this version of Nicholas was different. He was softer, not in weakness, but in patience. He listened more than he spoke. He offered help but didn't press. He let her lead. And slowly, her guard began to shift. One rainy afternoon, while the girls were napping, they sat in the small living room with the sound of light thunder outside. Olivia curled up on the end of the couch, a book in her lap, while Nicholas sat in the armchair with a cup of tea he hadn't touched. "I keep waiting for you to disappear," she said suddenly, not looking up. He didn't pretend to misunderstand. "I'm not going to." She closed the book but didn't look at him yet. "It's not that I don't believe you. It's that I don't know how to stop expecting it." "I don't blame you," he said. "But I'm still here." Silence filled the room again, heavy but not cold. When she finally looked at him, her eyes were glassy, not with tears but with the weight of what she had carried alone for so long. "Do you regret not knowing them?" she asked. "More than anything in my life," he answered without hesitation. "But that doesn't mean I'm going to spend the rest of my time with them apologizing. I want to build something with them, Olivia. I want them to know that I'm not just a visitor." "They already think of you as more than that," she said softly. "But I'm still trying to figure out what to think of you." He nodded. "Take your time. I'm not going anywhere." The thunder outside rumbled a little louder, but inside, the quiet between them shifted. It was no longer distance. It was beginning to feel like trust. That night, when the girls ran to him in their pajamas and pulled him into a goodnight group hug, Olivia stood in the doorway and watched. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. Her eyes told the story. Nicholas looked up and met her gaze, and in that single glance, everything between them became something new. It wasn't love again. Not yet. But it was hope. And that was more than enough. A month passed, and with it came a sense of rhythm none of them had expected. Nicholas no longer felt like a visitor. He wasn't just the man who showed up with warm muffins or bedtime stories, he had become something constant. The girls began to talk about him like he had always been there, asking if he would be at the school play, if he could come to the doctor's appointment, if he would teach them how to swim in the summer. They didn't ask for permission to love him, they simply did. And Nicholas, who had once walked through life with the confidence of a man who had everything, now found himself humbled by three small hearts that had opened for him without demand or condition. Olivia watched him closely during this time, not with suspicion anymore, but with careful wonder. He was nothing like the man she had walked away from. That man had been driven, brilliant, and charming, yes, but also distant, always 10 steps ahead of the moment they were in. This Nicholas knelt to tie shoelaces, stood in line for preschool pickup, and got glitter stuck to his cuffs from helping with craft projects. He carried June to bed when she fell asleep in the car and kept extra juice boxes in his briefcase, just in case someone gets thirsty. He was becoming a father not just by title, but by presence. And it terrified her how much she wanted to let him back in, not just for them, but for herself. One evening, after a long day of errands and birthday party planning, Olivia found herself alone with him in the kitchen while the girls colored at the table behind them. She was stirring pasta, and he stood beside her, drying dishes without needing to be asked. The simplicity of it, this domestic stillness, felt more intimate than anything that had ever passed between them before. "You know," she said after a while, "I used to imagine what this would be like if you had known. If we had raised them together from the start." Nicholas didn't look up. He dried a glass and set it gently on the counter. I've imagined that every day since I met them. I don't let myself go there often, she said quietly. Because it hurts too much. It feels like a whole life I stole from all of us. He turned to face her. You didn't steal anything. You did what you thought was best with what you knew. I hated it, yes. I resented it. But I also see them now, how happy they are, how safe, and I know they weren't missing love. They had yours. I just wish they'd had mine too. She stared at him, eyes filling slowly but not spilling. You're saying all the right things, Nick. It's hard not to let myself believe it. I'm not here to say the right things, he said. I'm here to stay. And if staying means proving myself every single day, I will. Not to erase the past, but to build something better from it. There was a silence between them, thick with emotion, and then Lily called out from behind, holding up a drawing. Mom! I drew Daddy. Both of them turned at once. Olivia blinked, startled, while Nicholas froze. None of the girls had called him that before, not directly. Lily didn't seem to realize the weight of what she'd said. She was smiling proudly, showing off a scribbled picture of him with a crown and stick figure arms holding hands with 3 smaller girls. He swallowed hard. Olivia looked at him, then at Lily, then back again. And she smiled. A small, hesitant, but real smile. It wasn't permission, not yet. It wasn't a surrender. But it was an acknowledgement that something had shifted again, that the space between fear and forgiveness was finally narrowing. That night, as he said goodnight to the girls and Olivia stood in the doorway watching him pull the blanket over Ava's shoulders, she whispered softly so only he could hear. You're doing it, Nick. You're becoming their father. He didn't respond with words. He just nodded, deeply moved, and looked at her like she had just handed him the world. Because in a way, she had. Spring came with longer days and gentler mornings, and everything in their lives began to bloom with it. Nicholas had started carving time out of his tightly structured corporate calendar to be with the girls more often, not because he had to, but because it finally felt like the only time that mattered. He wasn't just appearing at big moments anymore. He was there for the tiny, forgettable things, the cereal spilled before school, the lost socks, the giggles at bath time, and the quiet cuddles when someone was feeling small. Olivia no longer questioned whether his commitment was temporary. She saw it in the way the girls looked at him, the way they reached for his hand automatically, the way they called him Dad without hesitation now. And she saw it most clearly in the way Nicholas looked at them, like they were the center of a world he hadn't realized was missing. One Saturday afternoon, the 5 of them went to a local spring fair. The girls wore matching denim jackets, bouncing between booths with painted faces and cotton candy fingers. Nicholas bought too many raffle tickets and lost at every single game but pretended it didn't matter. He let them talk him into riding the carousel 3 times in a row, even though he hated the dizzying spins, just to hear them laugh. Olivia followed behind, camera in hand, documenting what felt like their first true day as a whole unit. Strangers passed them by and smiled like they were just another young family enjoying the weekend. Nobody saw the history. Nobody saw the lost years or the pain it had taken to get here. And for the first time, neither did she. That evening, after the girls had finally fallen asleep, exhausted from sugar and sun, Nicholas and Olivia stood together on the small balcony of the hotel suite. The sky had turned a soft shade of navy, and the city lights blinked like distant stars. Olivia leaned against the railing, her hair pulled back in a loose braid, the night breeze brushing across her face. Nicholas stood beside her, arms crossed over his chest, his presence no longer careful or calculated but quietly rooted. They had the best day, she said softly. So did I, he replied. I can't remember the last time I felt like this. Like what? Like I wasn't running from something. She turned to look at him. Were you running from me back then? I was running from anything I couldn't control. And you were never something I could predict. You loved big, you dreamed loud, and you didn't fit inside my world, Olivia. But now I see the truth, I didn't know how to live in yours. You were brave enough to raise 3 lives on your own. You didn't wait for someone to rescue you. You became everything they needed. And I want to be someone who deserves to stand next to that. Her eyes glistened with quiet emotion, but she said nothing for a moment. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a familiar silver necklace, the heart he had given her all those years ago. She held it in her palm, the moonlight reflecting off its surface. I kept it, she whispered. Even when I wanted to forget. Even when I told myself it didn't matter. Nicholas reached out gently and closed her fingers around it. It still matters. And so do you. The silence between them shifted again, this time into something fragile and deep. Not longing, not apology, but the early echo of forgiveness. I don't know what this means, she said, barely louder than the wind. It doesn't have to mean anything yet, he replied. It just has to be real. They stood there for a long time, not as ex-lovers or parents negotiating shared responsibility, but as 2 people who had been broken in separate ways and were now quietly beginning to repair something between them. And when Olivia leaned her head gently against his shoulder, Nicholas didn't move. He didn't speak. He just stayed there, still and sure, and let the weight of her trust rest on him like something sacred. Summer arrived gently, with golden light that lingered late into the evening and a warmth that settled over everything like a long-awaited exhale. The girls finished their school term with paper crowns and ice cream sticky hands, and Olivia began planning a quiet getaway to the coast, a chance for them all to breathe without the noise of the city, without the weight of past shadows pressing so closely. What she didn't expect was Nicholas offering to come along, not as a guest, not as a provider, but as a part of them. When she paused before answering, unsure of what it would mean, he simply said, I just want to be where they are. She believed him. The small house they rented was a few minutes from the ocean, tucked behind dunes and waving grasses, with a weathered porch and a garden filled with hummingbirds. It wasn't luxury, and it wasn't polished, but it was perfect in the kind of way that comes only with simplicity. The girls ran barefoot across wooden floors, laughed in the surf, and fell asleep to the sound of waves through the open windows. Nicholas, who once thrived on sleek towers and tight schedules, spent his mornings making pancakes shaped like sea creatures and his evenings reading 3 stories in a row because no one could agree on just one. He had sand in his shoes, freckles across his nose, and a calm in his eyes that hadn't been there in years. Olivia watched him, always quietly. She watched how he carried Lily when she got tired, how he let Ava correct his shell identification skills without interrupting, how he gave June space when she got shy, always returning with gentle presence instead of pressure. He never tried to replace the years he had missed. He simply filled the ones unfolding in front of them. And it was in those moments, watching the way her daughters trusted him, the way he spoke to them with kindness and not control, that Olivia began to feel the final pieces of the wall inside her begin to fall away. On their last night by the coast, they lit a small fire pit in the yard. The girls roasted marshmallows while Nicholas helped them turn the sticks slowly to keep them from burning. Olivia sat on the steps of the porch, barefoot, wearing a sweater that once belonged to him but somehow never made it back after one too many chilly nights. The moon was high, and the stars spilled like stories across the sky. When the girls finally drifted off, curled together on the couch with half-finished esmores still in their hands, Nicholas came to sit beside her. He didn't say anything at first. Just sat there, the silence between them no longer something to fix but something they shared. Then, slowly, he reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. It was a delicate silver chain, a match to the one she had carried all those years, the second half of a set, with a heart shaped to fit perfectly with hers. He opened his palm and offered it to her. I had this made when I bought yours, he said. But I never gave it to you. I thought I'd wait for the right time. She looked at it, then at him, her voice soft but steady. And now? Now I'm not waiting anymore, he said. Not for them. Not for you. I know we can't go back. I don't want to. But I want to move forward, with you, if you'll let me. Not as a perfect version of who we were, but as the people we are now. Flawed. Wiser. Ready. Olivia held the pendant in her hand for a long time. It was warm from being in his pocket, and yet it felt like it had waited for her, too. She thought of all the nights she had held on to the original, wondering if she was foolish to keep it. And now, as the sea wind moved softly through the trees and the firelight flickered across Nicholas's face, she finally let herself believe in something she had buried a long time ago. She reached for his hand. "I'm ready," she said. He didn't say anything right away. He just closed his fingers around hers and exhaled the kind of breath you only take when something heavy has finally been put down. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't cinematic. It was quiet and ordinary and real. The next morning, the girls woke up to find their parents drinking coffee on the porch, sitting close, laughing at something only they understood. And in that small moment, with the ocean humming nearby and a day full of sandcastles ahead, they felt what had been missing for so long. Not just love, but home. What I love most about the ending of this story is how quiet and grounded it is. It doesn't rely on a grand declaration or a dramatic twist, but instead leans into something far more powerful: emotional honesty and earned connection. Nicholas doesn't win his family back with money or charm. He rebuilds trust the only way that matters, through consistent presence, through patience, and by choosing to show up even when it's hard. That transformation, from a man who once feared vulnerability to someone willing to live inside it, is what gives the ending its weight. Olivia's journey is just as meaningful. Her forgiveness isn't rushed, and her trust isn't easily given, which makes it all the more beautiful when she finally reaches out, not because she needs to be saved, but because she's ready to let herself be loved again. And the girls, in their innocence and openness, become the bridge that reconnects two people who thought too much had been lost. This isn't a fairy tale where everything is suddenly perfect. It's something better, a story about people who break, learn, and heal in real time. And by the final chapter, what they've built together doesn't feel like a second chance at an old life. It feels like the first chance at a new, real one. And that, to me, is the most satisfying kind of ending.